Now we will jump straight in. Our three topics for this month are Israel and Hamas agree to a ceasefire. Number two, yet another US government shutdown. And number three, the new geopolitics of East Asia and Pacific. So, number one, Israel and Hamas agree to a ceasefire. Over to you, Glenn, because you've written about it and spoken about it, and you're all clued up on it. So over to you, sir.
I used to think, for a long time, I thought when I was working that whatever the issue was, gosh, here are all of the files I have on subject X or Y. If you change the dates and you change the proper nouns and the geographical, nouns, then everything really is just a repeat of what has happened before. So is that the case in the Middle East? It seems to be endless turmoil and churning with no progress. I think there are permutations that are substantive and significant this time, being as a result of the most recent war, we'll call it, in Gaza. So first,
over 2 years, actually, over 2 years of war between a non-state actor, Hamas, an Islamist, fundamentalist organization that won one election back in 2006, and that too, not that conclusively, and a state that is turning increasingly to the right, or far right, rather.
They probably won the election the way Stalin did, which was at the end of a gun. Well, not probably, they did. But to look ahead, we have to look back for a little bit, the very recent past. So what has happened, then try to see what will happen, what the consequences are. Well, most of us will have heard that President Trump, through his envoys, we can't really say negotiated so much as imposed a comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, a 20-point plan. There are many references to the 20-point plan. With this plan, I will say, anyone who's listened to me probably say one sentence will know that I am a critic of Donald Trump. But I will say that the prospects, for a lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians and in the entire Middle East are greater today than at any time since the Oslo Accords in 1993, which I watched occur from my office window, I looked down into the now destroyed Rose Garden in the south lawn of the White House as the accords were signed between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. So that's a dramatic thing to say if that is true. However, and I'll talk about why that could be and why that probably won't be the future. 7 months after the Oslo Accords in 1993, which was the resolution, it looked like, of the crisis, the clash between the Jews and the Muslims, the Israelis and the Palestinians, Hamas committed its first suicide bombing attack in northern Israel. And then months after that, the far right, the nationalist religious right of Israel, of the Jewish population, effectively ended the Oslo Accords by assassinating the Israeli prime minister in Tel Aviv in November 1995. I remember it vividly. I was then living in Europe. And that put paid to what looked like to be a lasting peace. Well, neither Hamas nor the Israeli right have changed one iota since 1993. And in the last 2 years. And if anything, the religious right, the ultra-Orthodox right in the Israeli context has become far more powerful and more intransigent and more demanding. So the fundamentals arguably have not changed at all, although we have a ceasefire. So before we get to the future. Let's talk about what the 20 points include. Don't worry, I will not go through 20 points, which is, well, Wilson had 14 points, and you can remember those. Same thing. So the comprehensive plan.
Since Woodrow Wilson had 14, Donald had to have 20. This is the
20.
biggest, bestest ever.
Nobody, to my knowledge, has said that. And I'm not sure that Donald Trump has ever heard of Woodrow Wilson to the 14 points, but there certainly is an essential truth to that statement. No question about it. So why is there a peace if the fundamentals haven't changed? Well, there are some substantial changes, structural changes in the Middle East over the last 2 years as a result of the war and elsewhere, and I'll get to the elsewhere in a moment, which have made the ceasefire happen possible and a long-term peace imaginable, although highly unlikely. Of the 20 points, really, 4 will happen, have happened, are likely to happen in the near-term future, and you can focus on them. Really, the ceasefire we've seen now; it's already been broken by both sides, but nonetheless, there's fundamentally a ceasefire in place compared to the endless blowing up by the Israeli military of the last remaining Palestinian structures in Gaza and killing Hamas, and then Hamas popping out of a hole and shooting at Israelis. So the ceasefire is likely to last on the whole. There has been, and this will last for a time, certainly a forced withdrawal by the Israelis, certainly at least of half of the territory of Gaza. And wouldn't the Israeli right like to say that? Of Gaza. And the hostage release, which we've all seen in the news, is likely to occur. And then the fourth aspect of these 20 points is that humanitarian aid, which the Israelis had largely not allowed in, will go in. And that started to happen immediately, arguably inadequately, with a lot of chaos, but nonetheless dramatically. So those 4 things have happened and are likely to last for some time. Why is that? And those are achievements. The absence of killing is in most instances a good thing. Why has this been possible, though? What's different today or a month ago from 2 years ago or 8 years ago or something? Well, there have been fundamental changes. Although I talked about how Hamas and the Israeli right have not changed in 32 years, there have been fundamental changes as a result of the 2 years of fighting. Israel has truly severely weakened Hamas, which was estimated to have had 30 or 40,000 fighters at the beginning of the war 2 years ago. The Israelis have killed, it's not certain, but upwards of 20,000. 10,000 Hamas fighters are estimated to remain, but they are of inferior quality from a military perspective than the people they are replacing who have been killed. And the Israelis have destroyed from 25% to 80%. Nobody really knows the answer precisely of Hamas's estimated 600 kilometers of tunnels. This astounding warren, which has made their existence and operations possible. So even 25% is substantial. Fundamentally, the Israelis have grievously weakened Hamas, but Hamas remains lethal. They remain capable still. Israel has also eviscerated Hezbollah in Lebanon, wiping out a substantial proportion of Hezbollah's leadership, missiles, and military capabilities. Hezbollah, as you all know, is Iran's surrogate in Lebanon. Israel did not directly destroy but contributed to the destruction of the Syrian regime of President Assad and its replacement by an erstwhile al-Qaeda member who really seems to be a Muslim Lebanese Syrian nationalist, and supported by the West, because he has danced all the right dances since he came to power with regard to pluralism, tolerance, non-hostile actions towards Israel, and so on.
If I may interject, that is not entirely true, in the sense that Ahmad al-Shara is a proxy for MIT, not the nice MIT in Boston, which you know very well, where your wife studied, but the MIT which you know, but the listeners and viewers don't. The Secret Service of the Turkish Secret Service, the Turkish intelligence agency, and Ahmad al-Shara, yes, he has sung the right tunes, but today Syria is like Swiss cheese. The Israelis destroyed the Air Force. They didn't trust Ahmad al-Shara. They destroyed all of the Air Force. I know it from the Israeli Air Force officers themselves. They were jubilant. They said, we've never, ever achieved this. We've destroyed the entire Air Force. And they were very pleased. They've taken over Golan. They are acting as protectors to the Druze. De facto, they have an extra bit of southern Syria as a buffer, and the Kurds will trust Ahmad al-Shara as far as they can throw him. And so the reality is, there is this fiction that there is a plural nationalist Syria, but reality, Syria has now many enclaves, and the Sykes-Picot era is dead. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty together again. And that is Syria. And so now what the Israelis admit is that now they are involved in a great game with MIT. It is Mossad versus MIT in Syria. The Turks are back after a century. And yes, the fiction of a united Syria may persist, but in reality, the Alawites are never going. They've been killed, by the way. There have been clashes. The Druze have been killed. So all people are retreating to their ethnic enclaves, and Syria will be pockmarked like Swiss cheese, but a more violent form of Swiss cheese. It wouldn't be as lovey-dovey and peaceful and idyllic as Switzerland.
Well, all true. The Israelis have always, at least off the record, been clear that a fractured Syria is better than a hostile one, and a bunch of weak factions is less of a structural existential threat than a coherent one, and everything could go dramatically worse. That's in Syria, no question.
Or better. Maybe Syria is better off as a federal loose setup like the US, or even like the EU, a union of different ethnicities as a common free trade area instead of a political entity. So, I mean, Syria is a Sykes-Picot creation.
Yeah, very early organic days, really. Lebanon was coherent and is now a strange, ineffectual confederation of the factions that you just described, in Syria. In any event, it's less of a strategic threat for the moment, and is a whether it is or it isn't, it's structurally dramatically different in a geopolitical context from Israel's perspective, and for the moment, less threatening. At the same time that all this was happening and the war is going on, now 2/3 of the Israelis support an end to the fighting. That wasn't the case for a long time. Fighting towards Hamas in Gaza. And then in July of this year, for the first time ever, the Arab League called on Hamas to disarm and to end the war. All of those are important. The most important change of all, what made the ceasefire happen, really, is in Washington. And that is, for the first time, a U.S. president, Donald Trump, was able to pressure the Israelis, Prime Minister Netanyahu, to accept a peace agreement and stop the fighting. And why was Trump able to do this? Because he has cowed or is in total control of the Republican Party, and he can now actually effect a policy towards Israel that domestic American political challenge can't stop, because he will destroy someone who challenges him in the Republican Party. And that's the fundamental reason why the peace agreement and all these other changes that I've mentioned were able to have the effect of a ceasefire. So
if I may jump in very quickly, sure. Glenn, what I am hearing from Israeli friends, and you probably have heard the same, is that the chief of Mossad and the IDF chief both told Bibi Netanyahu not to strike Hamas in Qatar. Bibi Netanyahu overruled them because of pressure from Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the two far-right nutters. Once the strike in Qatar happened, then this gave the occasion. Donald Trump piled on the pressure. And ultimately, if we are to believe the big Financial Times story, he had to choose between Israel and Qatar, and he chose Qatar. And he said, you've got to accept this. And he finally put pressure. And it's not that different from the Biden plan, by the way. The 20-point plan is quite similar to the plan Biden put together, or the Biden administration put together. So the important thing is perhaps the timing was right, and Israel is tired, the Israelis are tired. And yet what I hear from the Israelis is that they don't trust Hamas at all. And of course, if you talk to people on the Palestinian side, even those who are utterly unconnected with Hamas, they do not trust the Israelis at all. And both sides are waiting for the other side to break the peace. In fact, we've had clashes already. So the ceasefire may hold, but that is only because both sides are exhausted. And even though, let's assume Hamas is dead, the idea of Hamas lives on. There are too many young teenage boys wanting revenge, fired up by the idea of jihad, who have been traumatized by the hellscape they are returning to. Similarly, on the Israeli side, you have, if demography is destiny, it's the far right that are having more children. The Ashkenazi elite that has led Israel since 1948 do not have as many children. They are largely secular. They are the ones who lead Mossad. They are the ones who go to Sayeret Matkal. They are the ones who go to Ya'alom. They are the ones who are the natural leaders of the IDF. They are the ones who serve in the special ops units. And increasingly, they do not have political say and political power. So your best soldiers and your best spies are increasingly disenchanted. So that may be so, they'll still serve for now, but the political arc of Israel is set to move to the right just because of demography, unless, some of these children become secularized. So I'm very pessimistic. I think all politics is domestic at the end of the day. And given the realities in Gaza and given the realities in Israel, I think this is a prelude to round two.
But you anticipate, I agree with really everything you said, and you anticipate the concluding part of my few comments on the ceasefire and the situation in Gaza and Israel. If one goes to Jerusalem, one can sense this, that the Israeli society has shifted to the right, has become influenced and shaped progressively by the hard religious right. A woman taking a bus in Jerusalem now sometimes, and for years, will have problems because she will be harassed. She shouldn't be out because of the ultra-Orthodox right. This has nothing to do with the Muslims or outsiders. This is a shifting cultural context and religious context, for demographic reasons, as you say, for demographic reasons. So the second part of the 20 points is the structural changes, the long-term peace agreement that I said could be possible. But why is it exponentially harder to achieve than the ceasefire? Well, of course, the lasting change is always harder than a temporary ceasefire for a reprieve. And I'd say there are four elements, the main one being security. In Gaza and for each party to the conflict. The agreement calls on Hamas to disarm completely. Hamas never agreed to that whatsoever. They did what all negotiators do, which is to interpret an agreement in a way that favors their position while having fuzzy language that allows a signature. Hamas continues to reject this, and even though they talked prior to the signature, well, maybe we'll give up our offensive weapons, which they would then probably say we have none. And and the second thing for security is an international stabilization force is supposed to enforce the agreement. Well, that really would mean probably military forces from the Gulf states. Turkey has talked about being willing to go. No one is
but
really
Israel doesn't want Turkey.
enthused.
Israel has made it clear that they don't want Turkish forces at all.
No one is really too enthused about putting themselves between two murderous factions for what possible benefit to themselves, which would be probably zero. So that's
hang on a minute,
point.
Glenn. Tony Blair is ready to be Viceroy of Gaza, and BCG will come in trail to make money of all the consulting contracts.
So security remains something to be resolved and always put off to tomorrow because you can't solve it today, and that's a fundamental aspect of any lasting peace agreement. Then the issue is governance. Well, who was going to rule Gaza? Hamas says, well, you can't leave us out. And Israel says, well, the whole point of this was to destroy Hamas. We can't let Hamas back in. And maybe we'll have a secularized Hamas, a la the Irish Republican Army's political wing in Northern Ireland. That's at least conceivable to talk about. But who will govern other than King Donald from the Oval Office is unclear and hard to resolve. And then there's reconstruction and the grand bargain. And I'll wrap this up because I don't want to take too much more time. The agreement calls for the reconstruction of Gaza, which estimates go from $50 to $70 billion. Well, this has been pledged theoretically by Saudi Arabia and the Muslim states, but that's subject to several other conditions to the grand bargain with the United States, which means that we, Saudi Arabia, will sign a peace agreement with Israel, a peace treaty with Israel, recognize Israel and so on, and will help rebuild Gaza if the United States gives us a security guarantee from Iran and provides us nuclear technology and a two-state solution between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Well, how could any of this happen? It could conceivably happen if the American president continued to bash heads, as that's the strength of his, and to ride herd imperiously on his party, which is the Republican Party. I'm not attacking the Republicans particularly, but they're the party that his power relies on. He can control them. Therefore, he can set policy to a certain extent with regard to Israel and Gaza. If he were to do that, then there could be a lasting peace. To succeed in that would require sustained, as in multiple years of daily cajoling, harassing, imposing. Is that in Donald Trump's character? I submit that we have never seen any evidence of that. And so therefore the odds of a lasting peace are quite unlikely.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.